And then, of course, my love for drums. I'm originally a drummer who then started exploring tabla. I'll be playing half of the set will be new songs from my new album Dust, which will be coming out late in late February, March, and of course some older material from my albums. And yes, I'll be having some incredible guests on stage, and me and him and Bill Laswell and Salim Merchant, DJ Disc. We got in go karts and we did about four races, and I mean, this was the other side of Zakir Bhai. He would,
Wow.
he saw that this is your moment now. So, fly. And I'm right there. I'm right there to encourage you. And if you look back, I'm still watching. Nobody who saw the world like Zakir Bhai. He was way ahead of his time.
Your album with Anushka Shankar, Breathing Underwater, that mix classical sitar, tabla, electronica.
I mean, we first had kind of come together. We were spending a lot of time together. We were as friends. We were meeting in a lot of different cities, and then she had just started experimenting.
All right, we're very excited. These are our Lolla India 2026 specials. I'm joined by Karsh Kale, multi instrumentalist, producer, one of the people who changed how tabla and electronica talk to each other. Karsh, wonderful to talk to you. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Karsh, these are exciting times for us, but I want to start right at the beginning. I mean, many people know you, your fans know you as the man who put the tabla at the center of electronic music. How would you yourself describe your musical identity today? Percussionist, producer, composer, DJ, something else? And has that self label changed over the last 20 years, Karsh?
It's definitely evolved. I think that, I had, growing up, I was always mostly just a fan of music and wanting to understand the mechanics of music. So everything from songwriting to composing to arranging and, of course, performing on different instruments. So learning, becoming a better piano player made me a better composer. Becoming a better guitar player made me a better composer and writer of songs. And on this new album that I'm putting out, I'm singing most of the songs, so becoming a vocalist. I've always been a vocalist, but the producer in me always kept me out of the studio because I was working with such great singers. And then, of course, my love for drums. I'm originally a drummer who then started exploring tabla. So all of these things kind of became, colors on the palette. That the more and more I explored those things, the more confident I was in going in that direction. So I would say today, producer composer is really what I feel, as opposed to say percussionist or anything else. Everything else is kind of one part of the larger picture.
Karsh, do you remember your first experience with the tabla and the moment you realized you could blend it with electronic music? Was there I don't know, a single gig or record that made you think, this is the sound I want to build around?
Well, I mean, there was an evolution to that because at first there was just the idea that I wanted to even play the tabla. I mean, I obviously grew up listening to classical music. And my father was playing lots of classical music in the house, and then of course when I was about 7 years old, he took me to see Zakir Rai perform at Columbia University, and that was really when I realized that I'd been kind of enamored by these rock star types, bands like Led Zeppelin and the Police and Rush, and these incredible drummers, and then here's this rock star playing the tabla. So I realized that, okay, so this is possible to take. Until that point, these were worlds that would never meet. And then hearing a lot of the fusion that people like Trilok Gurtu, Zakir Bhai, Bill Laswell were doing in the 80s really opened my mind to the just even the possibility that tabla could exist in these different worlds. And then when I was in college, I that was when the jungle drum and bass scene was really happening, and that's where I really saw a meeting place between kind of the polyrhythmic, expression in tabla playing, and which was also found in jungle and drum and bass music. So that was kind of the doorway where I think those first experimentations happened. And it wasn't just me. I was that happened at the same time when this was happening in London. People all over the world were discovering this meeting place, where this ambient polyrhythmic electronic music was such a great meeting place for Indian classical music to be able to join and create something new, which also at the time was not just an experiment, but it was kind of an expression of the and a definition of the generation that was growing up in the 90s.
Karsh, you're on the Lollapalooza India 2026 bill. We're very excited. How are you planning the set for Mumbai? Is it going to be a narrative set, a club style DJ set, a full fledged band, or a bit of a hybrid? I'm sorry, just curiosity killed the cat. Will you be bringing any special guests or debuting material?
Yes, all of the above. I'll be playing half of the set will be new songs from my new album Dust, which will be coming out late in late February, March. And of course some older material from my albums. And yes, I'll be having some incredible guests on stage. Purbayan Chatterjee will be joining me on sitar, Ajay Prasanna on bansuri, and then of course Gaurav Raina of the Medieval Pundits on electronics. And then I have Komo Rebi and Neil Adhikari joining me on both guitar, keyboards, and vocals. So yeah, it's going to be a pretty diverse set. Kind of running the gamut from the early material all the way to material people have never heard before. Yeah.
Wow, that is
Yeah.
a sumptuous treat. Poor boy on medieval pundits, oof, the full Neil, who's now
Yeah.
been doing a lot of movie soundtrack work. Wonderful
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you balance tradition and experimentation when you're improvising? Let me explain myself. Do you start with a traditional tal karsh and then you adapt it? Or do you start with electronic grooves and then build tabla parts over them? And any tals you just keep returning to?
It really depends on, if it's my own creation. I tend to just start from an honest place. And, everything that we learn, whether it's, you know, comes from jazz or whether it comes from hip hop or whether it comes from electronic music or whether it's, you know, comes from tabla, kaidas, or whether it comes from classical music. These all just become sentences in a conversation you're going to have. Just for instance, I just did a beautiful acoustic gig the other day with this Swedish guitar player named Peter Tegnier and Ajay Prasanna on bansuri. And I was kind of in the middle of this conversation. It was a completely improvised set. And it's as if, when you're talking to someone, when I'm speaking to someone who I grew up with in New York, my accent changes a little bit in the conversation. And if I'm speaking to a classical musician, my accent will change. But what I will do is try and say the same sentence, and try and kind of include us all in the conversation. So, especially when we're improvising, it's nothing more than a conversation. So just like we do, when you're talking to different guests, you would ask them, based on where it is that they've come from, you'll at least open that doorway so that you break the ice with the comfort level, and then maybe you might throw something challenging into the mix. So yeah, for me at this point, it's not, I don't think traditional and experimental, and it's all one thing for me now. It's I've been doing this for long enough that I don't think, oh, this is Tintal and this is something that I got from a Public Enemy record. It might just all come out in the same sentence. you know
Lovely. Because you mentioned the great Ustad Zakir Hussain, there's been a 2 day festival, Maestro Forever, here, the NCPA, which the family and the NCPA organized, which is on his
yes.
Barsi, a tribute to him. And in 2023, I was MC on select dates on the Shakti 50th anniversary tour. So
Mm.
I've worked closely with Zakir Bhai over the years, both on interviews as well as the on-stage MCing bit. To me, Tabla Beach Science is a landmark project. I want to understand learnings from working with Zakir Hussain and Bill Laswell that still influences your work, Karsh, and any anecdotes from that collab that you'd like to share with us. That would be really cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. Zakir Bhai was, he was kind of when you're experimenting, when you are exploring and you are going. I mean, I remember there was a long period of time for me that I was always concerned about when, when the classical artists hear what we're doing, how are they going to react? What is, am I going to be told like this is blasphemy, to mix these two things together? And then spending time with, I mean, besides obviously listening to what he had done from the days of Shakti all the way till Tabla Beat Science, um, he was somebody who was, very encouraging, uh, to us, to myself, to people like Dalvin Singh, Nitin Sawhney. He was very, I mean, he was listening to all of the music, and he could see why it was relevant and why it was relevant to that generation. And so he very much pushed us to, as the Trekkies say, go boldly, go where no man has gone before, and do it, with confidence that, you're, even though you're walking in the dark, and you don't necessarily know where this winds up, that's the journey. And so Zakir Bhai was a very big part for me of kind of, you know by the time I was working with him and we were touring the world. I had already spent many years kind of doing my own, experimentation, and making some big messes out of it as well. And then kind of not perfecting it, but taking it to the point where by the time I was presenting it to him, he was very, you know, my first album had come out right a month before we performed together for the first time in front of 17,000 people in San Francisco. And, he knew that this was a moment for me. And he was very encouraging, and, very much was like, he saw that this is your moment now. So, fly. And I'm right there to encourage you. And if you look back, I'm still watching, and he always was. And, he was, something else. He was, the still to this day, I've worked with thousands of musicians, and from all over the world, from all walks of music, from world music, rock music, electronic music, classical music. But there was no one like Zakir Bhai. Nobody who saw the world like Zakir Bhai. He was way ahead of his time. And I think any performance that anybody saw of his, you were watching him kind of come down to earth for a moment to make it, palatable for us mere mortals, because where he actually existed in his mind was, he was on a different planet, and, we always felt that he was, but at the same time, he wanted you to treat him as a friend. He didn't want to, I remember we were doing a concert in Japan, and, we were passing by on our way to the venue. It was a big festival, some 10, 15,000 people at this festival. And we passed by a go-kart track. And, so we went and we did our sound check, and students came and they were all touching his feet, and then he kind of looked at me and he was like, "So what do we do now? We have about an hour and a half, 2 hours to kill before the show." And he's like, and I kind of looked at him with a little cheeky smile, and he looked at me and he said it, and he was like, "Let's go." So we got on a bus, and the promoters were like, "Oh, please don't leave, please don't leave." We're like, "We'll be right back." And we drove to the go-kart track, and me and him and Bill Laswell and Salim Merchant, DJ Disc, we got in go-karts and we did about 4 races. And, I mean, this was the other side of Zakir Bhai. He would,
Wow.
we'd be on tour, and, there'd be a cricket match going on, and we'd be in Houston or somewhere, and he'd be like, "Hey, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Is this match? You guys want to come watch this match with me?" We're like, "I'll do anything with you. Wherever you want to go, I'll go." So we'd go watch a cricket match at one of his friends' places, at 2 o'clock in the morning, even though we had to have to get up at 6 to go to the airport in the morning. His energy level, his ability to, always show up and be 1,000% on, was like no one else I've ever known. And, it's something that, when you meet somebody like that, it constantly humbles you. When I was growing up, there was when you're a kid, you kind of have that ego, like one day I'll be like that person. And the closer and closer you get, it's like, walking closer to the sun. You realize that I'll never ever be that. But what I realized is that what he taught me is to be as much of yourself as possible. and that's the best thing you can do. That was the greatest lesson I ever learned from him was don't try and be me, be as much of you as you possibly can, because and something that I've learned as I've gotten older is to get the hell out of the way of my music, get my ego out of the way, get my ambitions out of the way, and let the music speak, let the and let the music organically become what it is supposed to be. Another lesson that I learned from Zakir Bhai, it was a lifetime of lessons that, anybody that I work with that has spent time with him, like Salim, who's one of my closest friends, one of our, the reasons we ever bonded was because of, we both grew up, learning not just music, but how to navigate life from Zakir Bhai.
How beautiful is that? Amazing. Karsh, are you excited about some of the other artists playing at Lolla India 2026? I mean, who would you watch before or after your set? There's Linkin Park, Kelani,
Yeah.
Playboy Cardi, Youngblood, or the Indian acts, perhaps. Your friend Ankur Tiwari is on,
Yes, of
Nuclear,
course.
Ofen Severa. So, who are you excited about watching?
Yeah, all of the above. I mean, of course, Ankur, close friend of mine. It's been so great to watch his rise. I remember when he was, struggling playing in cafes and, playing in front of small little audiences to now becoming the superstar that he is. Nuclear, another one I've known for years, just hounding away at trying to be noticed in this kind of sea of stuff, and then all of a sudden, rising like a phoenix. He's, Nuclear is, his sets are explosive. Lincoln Park, who was always a big fan. My daughter loves Lincoln Park, and she's kicking herself because she's in school in Paris and can't make the show. Youngblood, I love what Youngblood has been doing. To me, he's one of the most legit new artists who's, he's dragging rock music into the future, and one of the few practitioners that, all of the great rock artists from, Ozzy before he passed, to guys from Guns N' Roses, to they all, Lenny Kravitz, they all see Youngblood as the next thing. And I've been following his music, listening to his interviews, watching him, really representing. And to me, he's one of the truest new young generation rock stars out there. So I'm very excited to see him. Yeah, lots of. There's so many new artists. There's Zoya. Um, yeah, I mean, a lot of the hip hop stuff's going to be exciting. But yeah, I mean, for me, I'm also keeping my head, at least in the game, so that once my set is done, let's go have some fun.
Your album with Anushka Shankar, Breathing Underwater, that mixed classical sitar, tabla, electronica. How did that collaboration come together, and what surprised you most in the process? I know it's been a few years, but if you go down memory lane, did that work really change how you think about melody versus rhythm?
Yeah, I mean, what it was for me and what it was for her was quite transformative, because we were both. Um, I mean, there were many dimensions to that project. I mean, we first had kind of come together. We were spending a lot of time together. We were as friends. We were meeting in a lot of different cities, and then she had just started experimenting with electronic music, and she was always a fan of electronic music, but she never kind of brought those worlds together. I was always experimenting with Indian classical music, but the electronic stuff was, probably came easier than the understanding of classical music. So I think a lot of people don't realize that on that album, a lot of the classical stuff, she kind of allowed me to become a classical composer, and I was pushing her to become more of an electronic fusion artist. And so we really pushed each other in those directions. And I was, most of the songs on the album I wrote on acoustic guitar. We would sit together with sitar and guitar and wrote pretty much the whole album as the base of the album that way. And a lot of the pieces, the melodies would be melodies I would sing to her. And then she would be like, yeah, well, wouldn't it be cool if we had a electronic arpeggiator and, add some bass line that sounds like this and use that sound from that psytrance track. And people would obviously think that she came up with the classical stuff, I came up with the fusion stuff, but it was really, for us, the exciting part was allowing each, because we knew where we wanted to go, and she knew that I'm not in that way a trained classical musician. So she was, of course she was there to guide me, and I was there to guide her. but it was really about that, about, both of us have grown from that project, and confidently moved forward in both directions, kind of crossing paths, and you know and allowing ourselves to grow in that direction. Yeah.
Karsha, I'm curious, how do you translate vocabulary across worlds? And do you ever act as a translator between musical languages during your sessions? Let me explain myself. I mean, at one end of the spectrum, there's Indian classical musicians like Aman and Ayan Ali Bangash, who you've
Mm.
worked closely with,
Yes.
the Sarod brothers.
Yeah.
And then there's Gaurav from Medieval Pundits, Gaurav Rana.
Yeah.
And when you're in a studio with such diverse worlds, are you acting as a translator between musical languages sometimes? Yeah.
I mean, in the beginning, I very much was. I was, I was working with people like Ustad Sultan Khan, Vishwa Mohan Bhatt, who are very classical in their approach. So it would have to be kind of translated. Sometimes I would be working on a piece. I remember there was a piece it was a full electronic piece called PD7, which was, an electronic piece in 7/8. But when Vishwa Mohanji came to the studio, I just played tabla and rupak tal in 7 and just gave him that bass. And then I turned the track on after he played so that he could understand what I was going for, because I knew that if I just gave him the track, he wouldn't express the way that he would as a classical musician. But that's changed over the years. Of course, there are classical musicians like Amanayan or like Anushka. They grew up hearing all this stuff. They don't need, if I, you just play a hip hop beat, all of a sudden their expression would automatically fit what it is that, where what it is that I'm trying to, go for. I mean, I just recently did this gig with the Swedish guitar player, Peter Tegnier and Ajay Prasanna, and that for me was a moment live, on stage where we were improvising, and they had never played together before. And both of them are, seasoned artists, so it was not something where I needed to be a translator. But it was really exciting to be able to kind of, I'd look to the left and my accent would change of what I was playing on the tabla, and then I'd look to the right and see Ajay ji, and my teka would automatically lock into what he was doing, and then I'd find a medium, and then all of a sudden I would see the two of them melodically have a dialogue. So that, like, we're now living in a world where, even if you're hardcore Carnatic artist, or if you're studying strict, form of classical vocal, you still hear everything. It's not like back in the day where, you play some new style of music for somebody and they're like, "Oh, I've never heard this before." So, it's the newer generation of artists that I work with, they get it.
It's wonderful that you said you're going to do your own singing in the next album. But
Mm.
I've always wondered, are there artists you seek out specifically for texture versus artists you approach for melody? How have you used guest vocalists in your records? Actually, it's equally true for acoustic players. I mean, so basically the question would be, what's your process for arranging those collaborations so they still feel like a Karsh Kale record?
Well, for me, when I make an album, it's very akin to making a film. It's a story. So there are characters, and when I first started making music, I was kind of the set designer. I would create the atmosphere, and then I would find the characters that would play the roles of the things that I was looking for. So if it was a female vocalist, do I want is it an older voice that I want? Is it something where I want wisdom in the voice, or is it something where I want innocence in the voice? Same with a male voice, and similarly with the instrumentalists. When I would have Sultan Khan on a track, it was a very specific reason to have him there. He's disarming in when he plays, and it's a moment where, when there's something very rigid happening, that when Khan Saab would play, it would just completely make you push your head back, you know and kind of be in awe of, wow, this is the Jedi who's in the scene right now. A Yoda character, is speaking, as opposed to say a Luke Skywalker. So that's kind of how I, look at collaborations. And even with this album, even though I finally became, allowed myself to be the center of the story, I've kind of felt like for me, I was waiting for, also I look for experience in the sound of somebody's voice. And, I always felt like in my own voice, there wasn't enough life experience in the sound of my own voice. Many people over the years were telling me, you have to sing more, you have to sing more. Um, but, when you're working with people like Shankar Mahadevan, all of the great singers that I've been able to work with, I would always put myself in the back seat, and be an accompanist. And I would sing in the studio to everybody, but I would never be that main character. And now I had, it was a moment where I realized it's time to tell my story. And who better than myself to tell that story? So that's, finally allowing myself to be the main character in this movie called Dust.
Lovely. Karsh, the role of visuals in your live gigs, and in particular at Lollapalooza, are you going to be using visuals on the screen? Do the visuals inform the music, or vice versa?
I think it's much more vice versa. I mean, there will be visuals. I'll be working with some great visual artists who are from the Wolves, who are very well known for their now internationally known for their incredible visual. And when I done the Up tour for my last album, the Wolves did visuals, and it was very much an improvised approach. I mean, obviously, once you do two, three shows, then they know, okay, I know what this song is. I know what that song is. How to create the atmosphere behind. There were moments where I would say completely cut all the lights so that all the musicians become silhouettes, and so that it's like there's a landscape happening behind us, and all
Wow.
you see are these dark bodies, without any lights coming on us. This particular show is going to be it'll be daylight when we perform at Lollapalooza. So visuals still, that's the great thing about LED visuals nowadays, is they also translate in daylight. So but it's not something where we're playing off of the visuals. The visuals are an accompaniment to the music.
You played at major festivals, you've created epic live shows. What's a live moment that still gives you goosebumps when you think about it? What made that night different? The crowd, the band, the visuals, I wonder.
Which night are you talking?
I'm talking
Pick one.
about a gig you've done in the past in your extensive career.
Well, I mean, oh God, there's so many to, well, obviously, the first Tabla Beat Science gigs were epic for me because I immediately was back 7 years old watching Zakir on stage, dreaming that one day I could just be around him. And then all of a sudden I was on stage in front of 17,000 people, dialoguing with him, improvising with him, speaking and creating something new that even he was quite blown away by. So that feeling getting off that stage was you know incredible. But I would say that the what I learned over the years, the power of music and the medicinal quality of music. The early tabla beat science shows were definitely very special in terms of just what was for me. I once again it threw me back to when I was 7 years old, seeing Zakir Bai for the first time, and then all of a sudden there I was on stage with him, you know, dialoguing and creating this brand new sound in front of 17,000 people in San Francisco. That was, I think a moment I'll never forget. Um, it was, everything that I had dreamed about as a musician was happening in one moment, and that, it's something that, I mean, I've had many fantastic performances, great festivals that I've played at since, but that was definitely a highlight moment for me that I know was um, transformative. You know, but then later on, I started to learn about the kind of what I called the medicinal quality of live performing. And then there were the NH7 shows where I was doing the finale concerts, where I was basically closing out the festival every city that we were playing in. And I remember one city in particular, I think it was Calcutta. Um, I think the headlining band was Mute Math, and I was taking artists from every stage, and all the stages would close, and we would do one finale set together. So the electronica guys, the fusion guys, the rock guys, everyone would come onto one stage, and I would curate a set. So it was a pretty high pressure situation for it to really go over well. And this one particular show, I the night before got some very bad food poisoning, and I was, I was in the bathroom all day long before the set, and was really afraid about what was going to happen. I thought I was going to have to run off the stage, multiple times as the set happened. Um, it was quite amazing that I was able to get out of my hotel room bed to get to that stage that day. But the moment I got on stage, and within the first, say, two songs, the transformation from being deathly ill to getting that incredible the incredible wave of energy from the crowd,
Wow.
and of course from the musicians and collaborators, that it just completely left my body. And that's happened multiple times, and that's that element of live performance. I think it's very hard to explain to people who don't perform live. And that too, I mean, sometimes it's an intimate concert where people are seated and they're, and you're having a very intimate dialogue, and sometimes it's that hello people and this wave of people standing on their feet are giving that energy back, and there's just nothing in the world like it. Yeah.
Lovely.
Mhm.
I've so enjoyed Realize, Liberation, Broken English, and Up, and I can't wait for Dust to release. I cannot wait to see you at Lollapalooza, India 2026. Thank you, Karsh
Awesome.
Kale, for what has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Great.
One world, your station.